Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be on this stage today to share my thoughts about the relationship between protests and answers. But before I start, I would like you to relax and calm down because this is not to start a fight, but to be aware of what's happening in the whole world and how to make a positive change. 2019 was the year of global street protest, all of them having different causes, methods, and goals. It would be too simplistic to point to a single common denominator or trigger, but they all have something in common. The fight for political freedom, the fight against inequality, and the fight against corruption. Most of the protests started at the same time, inspiring each other on how to express their demands and keep fighting for their ideals. And now you can see how turmoil in one place can feed a turmoil elsewhere. Seems like everywhere you go, there are protests. That there has been a rise around the whole world, and while not all of the protests have been shown in the news or social media, more footprints have been left behind by people marching the streets for a change. And even some of those people have died. Just to name a few active protests, think of United States, for example, and the police brutality protest. Think of Mexico and the perception that the government of the president has mismanaged the public health and economic crisis. Think of Colombia, where there's a collapse of gasoline supply chains and a degradation of water and energy infrastructure. You can also think of Poland and Bulgaria with their abortion rights protest. Or you can think of Iraq and the protest triggered by the demotion of a popular counter-terrorism leader who was fighting the government corruption. Think about all the coronavirus lockdown protests because of the enactment of measures to combat the spread of the virus. For example, in the United States, Colombia, Chile, United Kingdom, and so on. The list is infinite. Do you think that all of these protests have made a difference or brought any kind of change? Well, I think that while governments do feel the pressure by the demands and protesters, and they all feel the need to respond to the issues being talked about, there is no immediate answer or a quick solution as some citizens would like. For example, Chile's president Sebastián Piñera, he fired his ministers and shuffled his entire cabinet in an attempt to settle the mass protests that started over a hike in the subway fares. Hong Kong's leader Carrie Lam scrapped a controversial extradition bill, starting large protests for democratic freedom. Another case, Ecuador's leader declared a state of emergency after the streets of Quito were taken over by indigenous groups protesting the government's decision to end the fuel subsidies. Lebanon's prime minister also, he resigned after thousands of people blocked the streets for weeks, and one of the biggest demonstrations held against the government, etc. So no, I don't think there's such a big change yet, because most of the solutions to the problems given in each country and each society will take years to be analyzed, changed, and settled. There's also a negative effect, which is that as protests become more common and as the governments become more familiar with them, more used to seeing them, they feel less threatened by the protest. And if the government feels less threatened, then they're less likely to take any action. Let's all remember, for example, when the global climate change strikes started in the United Kingdom. While people were just raising awareness of the dangers of environmental change, there are still political leaders as Boris Johnson who attacked and insulted the rebellion activists during a conference. Or when the Black Lives Matter movement started after the killing of George Floyd and the President Donald Trump threatened with deploying the military. On another note, it's not just the fact that protests are increasing. There's also a huge increase in coverage and this has a lot to do with how accessible internet is nowadays. Because with the internet, it's easier for people to organize protests and to coordinate with supporters and create organizations. So while protests have been created under specific circumstances, it's clear that in each case people are demanding more and more from their governments, and that they will continue to let the world know about it. Therefore, I would like to finish this talk by encouraging all of you to take advantage of the internet, to educate yourself and others, to be aware of what's happening in your country and within the world. Don't sit down just waiting for what answers your government will give you, and more importantly, make your vote count. Voting is your responsibility as a citizen. The law doesn't require you to vote, that's for sure, but it's a very important part of any democracy. Voting is an opportunity for change, so make your voice heard in every election. Voting is the most powerful tool we have to make a difference not only in our lives, but the lives to come. Thank you.